watcher, and welcome along for the ride. Today we're going to get to the bottom of the matter. The matter in question being that fundamental underpinning of every human society. I'm talking, of course, about criminal lunacy. Not just your ordinary standard run-of-the-mill regular strength lunacy. We're talking concentrate. The demonstration of catastrophic cretinry to a degree that in the good old days would have earned as a minimum a damn good public thrashing, or in ultra extreme cases of course deportation to Australia. On which historical point, as always, we find that in order to fully understand this fascinating subject in the present, we need to turn briefly to the past. So where to begin? Well, obviously with the royals. And I suppose we just have to accept that it all started with the big spat between William and Harry. No, not those two. These two. We're talking William, Duke of Normandy, and King Harold II. The Battle of Hastings in 1066. Do keep up. Obviously, to help us connect that event near as damn it 1,000 years ago with the finest modern day exposition of criminal lunacy, we need God's help and a point of reference. And so we're going to church. St James's Church, to be precise, at a place called Edgecombe in Northamptonshire, right here in the middle of England. And by a miracle of modern transportation technology, namely me bike, but hold that thought, why don't you? Here it is, Edgecombe. Oh my giddy aunt, will you just look at the place and drink it in. The picture postcard perfect English hamlet idyll. This is England, thrice distilled. This is why we English, well, some of us at any rate, care about that thing called heritage. It's what we mean when we talk of home, the green and pleasant land. Here we have the textbook, achingly beautiful manor house, a proud rectory, and next door a tiny church, watching over the sleeping faithful with that reassuring, benign smile that only a church can wear, with a couple of cottages and farmhouses here and there, a couple of chickens and squirrels, that's about it. This is what they call peace. Peace of sense, peace of spirit, and peace of mind. Peace of mind. Surely nothing bad could ever happen here. It's magical fairy tale stuff. If doctors could prescribe this place as a medicine, well, there'd be no illness. Anyway, why don't you grab a cuppa while I catch my breath, and we'll have a wander about and a bit of a yap, because there's lots of ground to cover. I thought we'd start with a little mooch around the churchyard. I love these places with their softly weathered little memorials and their honour God ancient yew trees. These arboreal miracles can live for up to 3,000 years. Anyway, all of this collectively whispers to the departed. We can no longer remember who you are, but don't worry, we won't forget you. And one day, part of you will be reconstituted as a yewberry. Now, how comforting is that? Right, let's make this easy. You know how history lessons can quickly become tedious, a limp string of dates and names that all blur into one another without any context or reference model you can easily visualize. Well, we don't do that here on Singing with the Dead. So close your eyes and imagine a seabird colony, one of those ones you've seen a million times on the Nature Channel or Attenborough or whatever, when the little feathery chappies are nesting. And there you have a near perfect model of humanity, in which seemingly the easiest way to build a nest with least effort is to wait until your avian neighbour, having done lots of hard work, tootles off for his lunchtime sprat. Then you nip over to his half-built nest and nick some bits for your own half-built nest. And obviously while you do this, all of your other neighbours will be nicking bits of yours for theirs. This stunningly inefficient analogy serves us well when we consider human history and social development, never more so than in England, where, if you were to take that seabird colony social model, add every preposterous name you couldn't possibly make up, throw in a generous handful of Shakespeare play headline characters and fabulous figures and farces from European history, stir them all in random lumpy fashion into a mind-numbing plot that could only be described as slapstick, then seasoned to taste with tragedy and coincidence, voila! Your recipe is pretty much there for a much-needed visual point of reference. Oh, this church, by the way, dates from the very early 13th century, so just a tad later than our historical starting point in today's episode. But it is characteristically Norman in style, an austere square tower, some bold ribbed arches, which we'll see, and it's typical of dozens around here, offers a perfect and quite beautiful setting for our story. Let's have a look around inside while we talk it through. So here we go. Following an English regency line that included Ethelred the Unready and Harold the Harefoot, Harold II, last Anglo-Saxon King of England, descendant of Cnut the Great, son of Godwin, Earl of Wessex, succeeded his brother-in-law Edward the Confessor to the throne in January 1066. Almost before the coronation party was over, Harold found himself fighting off the nest-pinching activities of one Harald Hardrada of Norway, who he successfully repelled in the city of York, a favourite Viking raiding party venue. Now, having trundled all the way up to the north of England, it was of course absolutely inevitable that another ruddy nest-nicking penguin would encroach in the far south, and so it was that just 2 weeks after seeing off Harold headed to Hastings to see off William the Bastard, which of course he pointedly failed to do, one in the eye for English military credibility. And this rather slow English north-south traversal, ending in embarrassing catastrophe, hold that thought as well, turned out to be quite prescient and one of those crucial pivot points in history. Nothing was quite the same after this, and everything, it seems, was defined by it, including astonishing new highs in the severity of offences of English criminal lunacy. This William, the Bastard, he wasn't a king of France, just a mere Duke of Normandy, a descendant of Rollo the Viking, who claimed part of northern France from the then French monarch King Charles the Simple. Now, William had for many years struggled to hold on to his little seabird colony bit of France, but having finally stabilised and consolidated his dukedom, saw the death of Edward the Confessor as a massive nest-grab opportunity on the other side of the English Channel, and with one well-aimed arrow made it stick, as it were. Now, as any goony bird will tell you, the bigger and more fragmented your nest, the harder it is to hang on to the damn thing. And so it was that our little illegitimate chum spent the rest of his life fending off pecking rebellions here, there and everywhere, all the while probably grateful that, having defeated Harold, history would come to recall him by the ever so slightly more acceptable epithet, the Conqueror. But why do we care? What's the point? The point is that William's invasion triggered a seismic change in the social, political, cultural, administrative and religious development of England. It established the French connection. No, not that one. The Anglo-French connection. Previously a Pictic, Celtic, Nordic, Germanic, Anglo-Saxon tribal porridge of a nation, the Norman conquest shifted England's focus from the north to central Western Europe. Remember that Cnut the Great fella? That was he of the holding back the waves legend. Well, he wasn't just King of England, he was also King of Norway and Denmark. Back then, England was culturally and politically part of a Scandinavian empire. Under William's Norman influence, the English landed gentry was restructured. The church was realigned with the papal thinking of Rome, with bishops heading dioceses centred on fabulous Romanesque and Gothic cathedrals built for the purpose, and new monastic orders were introduced that established glorious abbeys. The language changed, the law was refined, building and architecture was transformed, with massive new fortifications built, along with hundreds of modest parish churches, just like St James's Church here in Edgecote. Phenomenal undertakings of the time, incredible investment of resources, and astonishingly successful engineering. And please add that thought to the others. In addition, the first comprehensive, meaningful survey of England was commissioned to produce the Domesday Book, and, well, much more besides. Anyway, the line of Norman kings from William didn't actually last very long, about 100 years or so, but the perpetual lethal waltz between brave England and her passionate lover La Belle France had commenced. You may apply your own preferred pronouns to suit. The last Norman king was Stephen, a rather inept bloke who completely lost control to Guillemot nest raiders from Scotland and Wales, and also, strangely, France, in the shape of Matilda of Anjou. Did someone say Waltz? Who, following some brilliant diplomacy, ensured that her son, Henry the Curtmantle, was to become the first English king in the French Plantagenet line. And oddly, this French King Henry II of England was mostly famous for his military genius that led to an expansion of his continental lands until most of France was under his English rule. A waltz indeed. Stay with me, people, stay with me. Henry II's main other claims to fame were the establishment of the English trial by jury system and that ever so slight misunderstanding with Archbishop Thomas Becket that led to the latter's murder in Canterbury Cathedral. This line of Plantagenet kings continued through to the end of the 13th century, with Henry III himself a great builder and the man credited with curating and developing the English Parliament at Westminster. Whew. Tell you what, let's take a pew, as it were. That outside one. It's a beautiful evening. Of course, all great romances have their swings, and in magnificent Burton Taylor fashion, England and France were soon to celebrate their mutual intertwined love with an extended mortal embrace in the form of the 100 Years' War, triggered when King Edward III of England woke up one morning and decided that he was also King of France, a view not widely shared on the other side of the English Channel. La Manche. Whatever. Are you getting the seabird colony analogy here? Good. So we can skip through our Henry V, Agincourt, Black Death, a couple of temporary truces, Joan of Arc, etc., and find ourselves exhausted in the year 1453, with the English having brilliantly snatched defeat from the jaws of victory, and domestic nest in tattered ruins, facing huge unrest at home from the barony about the catastrophic cost in taxes of a futile century of war. The English, they don't like their precious money hoovered up in taxes, only to be squandered on frippery nonsense. Hold that thought, along with the others. Clearly, the only credible solution for a disgruntled Englishman in such circumstances of post-war exhaustion was, to declare war on somebody else. And so it was that barely 2 years after the theoretical end of the 100 Years' War, in fact England and France were technically still at war for another 20 years, England declared war upon herself for a nice change, in the form of one of our long series of civil wars, this one known as the War of the Roses. How sweet. Between the supposedly thoroughly English dynastic houses of York and Lancaster, which in reality were just offshoots of the French Plantagenet line. But you have to love that term, though, don't you? Civil war. Oh, no. After you, sir. No, after you. Good old Latin. Anyway, one of the defining battles in this nuanced little spin-off subtext to our French connection took place just a couple of 100 yards away. This was the Battle of Edgecote, a brutal confrontation, one of several episodes of ritual, barbarous, blood-soaked butchery hereabouts, that would eventually lead to the emergence of the Tudor monarchy line, and consequently the development of English naval power and hence empire, and the establishment under Henry VIII of the Church of England, that would portend the destruction of so many of those fabulous Gothic churches and abbeys built by the Normans. And by the way, as a neat little coda to this part of our riveting story, wake up at the back there, that wonderful house, Edgecote House, was once, in a previous build, the home of one of that particular Henry's many wives, namely Anne of Cleves, and it was also used many years later as his army base by King Charles I before the nearby Battle of Edge Hill, the first major battle of that other English Civil War, the one where the Cavalier Royalists took on Oliver Cromwell's Roundheads, defender of our old friend Henry III's Parliament, and spectacularly lost. It's starting to look as though this place of idyllic peace hasn't always been so. In fact, it has often been the epicentre of raging conflict, it would seem. In 1543, almost exactly 100 years before Cromwell's parliamentarians triumphed, Edgecombe House and its accompanying estate were purchased from the Crown by one William Chauncey, by coincidence an elected member of our Westminster Parliament, and many generations of the Chauncey family lived here until the property was eventually acquired in the early 20th century by the famous English Courage brewing family, before being acquired by its present owner. Most of the memorials we saw in the church were for the Chaunceys. Oh, and if the current house looks strangely familiar, that may be because it featured in a little TV series a little while back called Pride and Prejudice. Yes, but where is the criminal lunacy, and where the French connection? Get a move on, man, I hear you cry. Well, amidst this glorious tranquil sanctuary of classic English hamlet, reeking of the seeping poultice of history fair and foul, here it is, just a few hundred yards away. Welcome to the weeping, terminally infected lobotomy wound that is HS2, England's latest civil engineering war, founded on the French connection, a failed railway infrastructure project crashing destructively and pointlessly right through, among other things, our nearby historical site of the Battle of Edgecote. So let's try and connect this travesty to our French connection model of reality. Now pay attention. It's vitally important to understand that the Anglo-French romance, going all the way back to William the Bastard, is premised on the fact that the English adore the French, precisely because they despise the English, for the simple reason that they know that we're really more French than they are. But we cleverly pretend not to be able to speak the language. True passion never had a stronger foundation. And so it came to pass in this epic tale of unrequited love and smouldering national lust that a physical union was finally consummated between England and France as the 20th century drew to a close, in the form of the Channel Tunnel, inaugurally penetrated by a long, sleek Eurostar train up the French end, as it were. Quite right, too. A high-speed rail link on the English side was constructed between Folkestone and London, no such upgrade being required in France, of course, as they already had far superior transport infrastructure to anything found in England, inventor of the railways. This new rail connection was, with characteristic English branding, flair and panache, romantically named HS1. It almost works, allegedly, and through the miracle of governmental accounting there are even some who would declare it a profitable enterprise. And so to HS2, and at this point you may wish to recall all those saved thoughts from earlier. Oh, and by the way, you may make up your own expansion of the H and S. It has been rumoured that high speed has something to do with it, a suggestion that is clearly nonsense, as we'll see. Perhaps holy shit is more apt. The Baldrick-style cunning plan for Holy Shit 2 was twofold. First of all, seamlessly integrate with, build upon and extend the shining success of our HS1 link to our lover Paris, up into the heart of England and onwards to the north, mimicking the national train grande vitesse, high-speed rail network in our beautiful Gallic neighbours' lands. Secondly, by so doing that, achieve what was to become tagged levelling up, with tightly integrated high-speed rail links to the English Midlands from the north-east and the north-west, onwards down to London and through to Western Europe via the Channel Tunnel. The English economic wealth imbalance focused on London would clearly be spread more equitably to the north. Now, a potato of average tuberesque IQ would be able to tell you that if everyone sees their best economic prospects as being in the southeast, and you build a high-speed rail link connecting the north to the southeast, there's only going to be one predominant economic direction of travel on that line, and it ain't due north. Let's park that minor wrinkle in the plan and look at how it went. Well, it turns out that these things cost money, lots of it. So having balked at early budget projections, it was decided to inflict economy number one. Let's forget about connecting the new HS2 to the existing HS1 at all. Let's have two completely disconnected high-speed lines. They can go to different London stations and require multiple tube journey interconnections, but maybe no one will notice the cataclysmic disintegration of Le Grand Projet Anglais, and we'll save a few bob. Plus, most importantly, someone of low intellect and without a proper productive job gets to announce a big project in Parliament to shift the political focus from the bad news of the day, and someone of equally low intellect will get to cut a ribbon a few years later for precisely the same reason. So, with a totally compromised solution and a business case held together with second-rate sellotape and a bit of spit, the farce was approved. At this point, having ignored our erstwhile demographic transport analyst, the potato, we might decide to consult the average plank of wood, who, in the role of cost accountant and quantity surveyor, could advise you that taking at face value the initial projected budget for any large-scale civil engineering project for which you are carrying all the risk is quite likely to lead to something of a financial disappointment. Let's bag up this case of criminal lunacy quickly, in round numbers, and there are lots and lots of round numbers. Initial budget in 2009 for the whole programme, about 20 billion, for a non-integrated rail solution with a cartoon business case that assumed, for example, that no one ever does anything productive at all while sitting on a train, and that those trains we're sitting on just staring into space will be running at up to 250 miles per hour, one in each direction every 3 minutes at 99% service reliability, none of which has ever been achieved before, anywhere. What could possibly go wrong? Well, the fantastic optimism for a start. Within 4 years, increased that budgeted cost by over a third. 10 years in, and the projected cost to completion have doubled. And just 1 year later, we're at something in the region of 110 billion. Problems apparently included such insurmountable engineering challenges as slightly squidgy soil conditions in places, something I don't recall troubling the Victorians, who littered the country with railways in about 20 minutes flat, or the Romans with their magnificent roads, or, of course, the lovely Normans with their massive cathedrals, boutique churches, wonderful abbeys, and foreboding castles. Anyway, you already know what happens when the English get grumpy about wasted tax revenues. So to avoid a civil rumpus, we implement, guess what, a savings programme. Now, the original headline attraction of this Éléphant de Blanche was a 20-minute shorter journey time from Birmingham to London, the current fastest rail time from central Birmingham to central London being 1 hour and 20 minutes. Except, well, it never was a 20-minute saving, because the new line doesn't actually go to the main Birmingham rail hub. You would always have needed to get a slow connecting train to the outskirts of Birmingham to pick up HS2. Oh, merveilleux! But let's not worry about that, because in any case, now we've narrowed many of the tunnels to save cash, so the trains will have to slow down through them, increasing journey times. Meanwhile, well, we've had to spend a bit more than budgeted again, as we've realised that the train carriages have been ordered with too few doors, causing station stop delays to services, should they ever actually commence. That problem has now been fixed, of course, at huge cost, with a fresh new design, which is rather radical, it turns out, having doors now that are too high for HS2 platforms. Luckily, this latest understandable little glitch has only cost a mere £188 million to put right. Whew. Trains will also now be shorter and have fewer seats, a business case challenge only lightly mitigated by the fact that many more people work from home now anyway, and so demand, and hence value for money, will be significantly reduced since the project was first formally proposed a decade and a half ago. Oh, and we've cancelled the links to the northwest and the northeast. Did we mention that? Oh, and it doesn't go into central London anymore, as the cost of the London terminus at Euston Station works has ballooned catastrophically. So as well as getting several tube links across the capital to connect to our French connection HS1 to Gay Paris, you now also need to prendre un train de l'escargot from un petit North London station into town pour catch the tube. Alors, a slow, disconnected, inconvenient shuttle service from outside Birmingham to outside London comprising less than 1/3 of the original project scope, is currently forecast to cost several times the original budget for the entire integrated infrastructure programme. But that's nothing more than a simple national wealth destruction programme on a gargantuan scale, a minor irritant. D'accord. We have not even begun to lift the covers on the catastrophic non-financial cost, like environmentals, not least from hundreds of thousands of heavy plant and truck journeys further demolishing the pitted gravel tracks we used to call English roads. The opportunity cost of the waste, the wrecked landscape, decimation of 25 ancient woodland sites, ruined villages and trashed housing tales of woe. The social cost of massive upheaval, the environmental impact of construction, the transport disruption at every crossing point along the entire route for a decade, the knock-on effect of inflated prices across the construction industry as HS2 buys up plant, equipment, materials and personnel and parks them, inactive, for months at a time as failed plans are repeatedly redrawn. The real estate cost of land and properties unnecessarily purchased and now unsaleable, the human cost, it goes on and can't meaningfully be measured, not even by the performing Charlie Caroli clown troupe of accountants and surveyors in our Ministry of Transport and Treasury. In the fictional expectation that the tattered remnants of what is left of Holy Shit 2 might now be completed within its present budget, its cost per mile will be 10 times greater than that of comparable projects in Europe, and as such, ce sac magnifique has now been declared unachievable by the government. Hurrah! And yet we build on. The constructional merry-go-round continues. Dear Lord above, even King Charles the Simple could have made a better fist of this project. But wait, this can't possibly be mere incompetence, oversight, mismanagement, carelessness. This is epic criminal lunacy writ large, because otherwise it could only be a massive fraudulent conspiracy. Couldn't it? That William and his French connection, he has a lot to answer for, the bastard. Because with Holy Shit 2 in progress ad infinitum, there's an awful lot to worry about for an awful lot of people for an awfully long time to come yet. The heart of England, even here in not so sleepy as we first thought Edgecott, may well need a pacemaker to preserve its own peace of mind. Anyway, thanks for watching. Go peacefully, with an inner smile and a third-class ticket. I've witnessed the setting, stars on the ocean. I've peered into flowers, wonderment stilled. I've gasped at the leaves, autumn's commotion. Seen hope on the rocks, wild dreams fulfilled. Seen years of silence through the eyes of the blind. Never did find my own peace of mind. I whispered to seashells, heard their reply. I've rested 'neath oak, 1,000 years old, sung with the church bells, tears in my eyes, seen spirits broken, mysteries unfold, from the raptures of newborn to the ravages of time. Never did find my own peace of mind. They tell me of colours no rainbow shows. They speak of the mountains suspended from clouds, whose rivers expire where life's estuary flows. Neath the funeral pyre and his shroud, I've screamed to the cosmos, my prayers were declined. did find my own peace of mind.